Hi, today I'm going to talk a bit about good posture and why that's important in singing. The most important reason is that it allows our support system to function properly. The support system here in our intercostals, which are the muscles in between the ribs, and staying nice and tall and allowing our diaphragm to descend. If we're hunched over a bit, one of these is not going to function properly. Another reason is that it keeps the vocal tract in line. And if you think about it, so the larynx sits right about here, and inside that contains the vocal folds. And this whole mechanism is about the size of a walnut. So any slight variation in neck position, chin position, is going to affect your sound, especially if you see that from the side. So staying nice and tall and keeping the body in line is really important. Also, if you're walking out on stage and say you see someone standing really tall and expanded, we expect a confident performance, we have high standards. As opposed to someone walking out very small, maybe our expectations get diminished a bit. So it's a good setup for the audience as well. It's important if you are working with a student or even for yourself that the one-size-fits-all model does not necessarily work. We're all built differently, so just telling someone to stand up straight is not necessarily the answer. It's good to know your own body and your students and how they align and where tension might arise. Myself, having mild scoliosis my whole life, I was told to stand up straight, and I didn't necessarily know what that meant. So I overcorrected and did some things that created more tension, and so getting to know my own body was very important in that process. Another reason to have good posture in singing is related to stamina. If you have tension issues in your body, you're going to get very tired very quickly. Where if you have very good posture, you can just keep going and your mechanisms are going to work correctly and you'll be able to go for a long time. There are so many things during the course of the day that can get our body out of line. One of the most obvious would be the use of our cell phone. If we think about the position that we get when we're on the phone, when we're looking at texts, or when we're texting, we get very, very much out of line. We bring everything forward. And we use our cell phones for so many things these days. It's really important to just bring the phone to you rather than trying to reach and look. Another thing is, as musicians, we're often sitting at a piano practicing, learning music, and it's very easy to get collapsed in that position. So if you think about the small of your back, which is right here, if we keep that tall and engaged, it keeps the rest of our body generally in line. But as soon as we let that collapse, everything comes forward. And this happens when you're sitting at school or at work and sitting at your desk. It's so easy to let the small of your back collapse. So keeping that nice and tall and just keeping that as a frame of reference really helps keep your body in line. So what are some exercises we can do to arrive at good posture? The student is going to demonstrate a few of them. One would be just stretching your arms above your head, getting a nice stretch, making sure the sternum stays tall, and then just bringing them back to your side, keeping your sternum in a tall position. It sounds very simple, but it's very effective. Another exercise is what's called a ragdoll. People probably have all different names for it, but that's what I call it. And that is bending over at the waist all the way, keeping your knees nice and springy, releasing tension everywhere in your body. So your neck, your head, your jaw, your tongue, your arms, your hands, your knees, everything. And just do some deep breathing and really feel that. And then eventually you stand up one vertebrae at a time, very slowly until you're all the way up. And then you roll your shoulders back and your head in a nice position. Whenever I do that, I generally feel about 2 inches taller. Another exercise a lot of teachers do with their students is have them line up against a wall with their feet and their butt and their shoulders and their head. But again, keep in mind that one size does not fit all, so not every student is going to have the same parts of their body align against the wall. So just something to keep in mind, and ask your students when they're doing that, do you feel tension anywhere? Do you feel like you're overcorrecting to try to do that? And find what's best for that student, what's going to align against the wall. Once they're in a nice tall position and it feels comfortable, have them walk away from the wall and maintain that position. As far as head position, if the head starts getting too high or too low, one thing I do with my students, and I don't do it for a long time, but I do old school, I put a book on their head and just keep it in that position and have them walk around, keeping in mind that they're not adding any tension anywhere, but their head's not getting in a high position. Another thing I do is create an L here, and again, everyone's built differently, so where does that L line up? So for me, it's right about like this. And so if I'm doing some simple exercises, especially ones that don't make my jaw drop, because that's going to push down, but you can feel when your head pushes down on your finger, and you can definitely feel when it lifts away from your finger. So as we start singing higher, quite often the chin wants to elevate. And this is a good check to just kind of make sure that the chin stays in a nice medium position. As you start getting lower, careful, there's a little tendency to hee.
Oh, yeah.
Notes. So let's just very gently, don't push it in or anything, just make a little L.
Okay.
I'm just going to keep it in that position. So
Okay.
Don't let your chin raise from it, and don't let your chin push
Gotcha.
on it. 1, 2, ready, That's fascinating, because usually at that point you are like fighting to go into chest raise, and that's
helpful.
Yeah, good.
Definitely.
Using a mirror is really important because it keeps us honest. We can see what we're doing. The only problem with that is that we can't see what we're doing sideways, and that's quite often where a lot of the issues are. If I'm looking at a student straight on, I see certain things. But as soon as I turn them sideways, I can see a whole different array of problems. And so this is where videoing yourself or videoing your student comes in really handy, especially from a sideways angle, because we don't always see what we're doing. And it's really, really easy to see where our body gets out of line. Another thing I like to do in my students' lessons is isolate moments, especially related to posture, where something might be out of line, and I just say freeze. And the student's not allowed to move, and they know this. And we evaluate what it is that's out of line, and quite often it's the head position. Good. Just hold your head in that position. How can you improve it? Very good. And so you can see that with this student, who thought that they were having good posture, was able to isolate that moment where the head was out of line and make the necessary adjustment to put it back in place. And quite often it's an interesting moment for myself and for the student. I like to think of posture from the bottom of your body up through the top of your body, and including the arms. So if we start with our feet, examining that while we're standing, are they too close together? Are they in a comfortable position? Do we feel balanced? Is there tension in our toes? We travel up through our calves, and then our knees. Are our knees nice and springy? Do you feel like you have movement in them, or are they locked? Then we go up through our thighs, up to our pelvis. Is our pelvis tilted forward or tilted back? The small of our back, is it arched in an uncomfortable position, or does it feel comfortable? We go up through our core, up to our rib cage. Are our ribs nice and expanded? Is our sternum tall, or are we in a collapsed position? Traveling to the arms and the shoulders. Are the shoulders back, but not in an uncomfortable position? Sometimes we put our shoulders back, but we're rigid and we're in a stuck position. So making sure we still feel freedom there. Are arms stuck? Quite often you see singers that get in this stuck position. You want to make sure that your arms are nice and free, that your hands, your fingers are nice and relaxed, and that we're not getting in a locked position like that. And then also going up here, so we make sure that our chin is not in an elevated position. And then our face, making sure that's nice and relaxed. Our forehead is not tense. And then tongue, making sure that your tongue is nice and forward, nice and relaxed on your vowels. It should be touching your bottom teeth. And so I do myself, and I have my students do lots of tongue stretches, because most of the tension with the tongue, and this is related to posture, it's tongue posture, most of the tension is in the back of your tongue. So stretching that forward as far as you can, holding it for about 10 seconds. I do this several times a day, and it really helps to release the tension in the tongue. Some common faults related to posture include rounded shoulders, collapsed sternum and rib cage, elevated chin, chin too far forward, pelvis tilted forward, pelvis tilted back too far, forehead tension, and in addition, feet too close together and locked knees. Some teachers physically work with their students as a means to correct certain issues. So they might make adjustments with their students, they might touch them here and put their shoulders back. And that's sometimes the most effective means of correcting an issue. If you're a teacher, make sure that you ask your student first and just say, is it all right if I work with you physically? If you're a student and you don't feel comfortable with that, just speak up and say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with this. Can you explain this to me in a different way? Usually it works out just fine, but you just want to make sure that you have that communication between teacher and student, and that's all right. There are so many different styles of vocal music: classical, musical theater, jazz, folk, pop, rock, and many, many others. And you might not always find it appropriate to feel like you're standing as tall as you can, depending on what style you're singing. However, training your support mechanism with good posture is really important, because then you can sing correctly in whatever position your body is in. So if you're in a musical theater production and you have to start a song and your director has you in a fetal position in the middle of the stage, you can still isolate those muscles because you've trained correctly. Whereas someone who hasn't trained correctly might end up straining. Please feel free to share your exercises and ideas for arriving at good posture, and my next chapter will be on breathing and breath support. Thanks for watching.